Originali.
Da Dario Albertini, bentornati a Lingue Originali. Questo è il primo dei 3 appuntamenti della settimana, quello del venerdì dedicato alla letteratura in lingua inglese. Tra poco ritroveremo Marco PIovaz, ma la scorsa settimana avevo promesso che avrei fatto un passo indietro, quindi avrei in qualche modo riavvolto il nastro a beneficio di tutti coloro fra di voi che ci hanno raggiunti in corsa o che magari hanno perso le primissime puntate in ottobre e che, perché no, potrebbero sapere poco, se non niente, dell'ultimo romanzo di Forster, Passaggio in India, A Passage to India. Vi do dei cenni, non voglio assolutamente spoilerare l'intero romanzo. Protagonista è Mrs. Moore, un'anziana signora inglese che parte per l'India con la giovane Miss Adela Kested. La loro destinazione è Chandrapur. Qual è lo scopo del viaggio? Apparentemente è un viaggio con un fine romantico. L'anziana signora vuole far conoscere alla sua compagna di viaggio Ronnie Eslop, figlio e magistrato in quella città. Dove siamo? Siamo in India. Atmosfera, terra affascinante, ricca di mistero, di spiritualità, paesaggi bellissimi, ma una terra profondamente divisa. Chandrapur, dicevo, è la città dove sono dirette le due signore, che ha una sua parte alta e una sua parte bassa, un po' come la nostra Bergamo, ma il senso di questa città alta e città bassa in realtà per Chandrapur è completamente diversa. Ci sono gli inglesi da una parte, ci sono gli indiani dall'altra, ci sono gli indiani molto vicini agli inglesi e poi ci sono i poveracci, come si dice. Ci muoviamo in questo contesto nel quale a volte si organizzano degli eventi sociali per far incontrare i due mondi. Vi dico solo questo per stavolta. Nella prossima puntata farò ancora un'aggiuntina, come si dice, allo scenario, all'ambientazione di Passaggio in India e Passage to India. Parleremo anche della versione cinematografica. Per ora vi lascio ancora una volta a Marco PIovaz.
The first cave was tolerably convenient. They skirted the puddle of water and then climbed up over some unattractive stones, the sun crashing on their backs. Bending their heads, they disappeared one by one into the interior of the hills. The small black hole gaped where the varied forms and colors had momentarily functioned. They were sucked in like water down a drain. Bland and bald rose the precipices, bland and glutinous the sky that connected the precipices. Solid and white, a Brahmani kite flapped between the rocks with a clumsiness that seemed intentional. Before man, with his hitch for the seemly, had been born, the planet must have looked thus. The kite flapped away. Before birds, perhaps. And then the hall belched, and Humany returned. A Maraba cave had been horrid as far as Mrs. Moore was concerned, for she had nearly fainted in it, and had some difficulty in preventing herself from saying so as soon as she got into the air again. It was natural enough. She had always suffered from faintness, and the cave had become too full because all the retinue followed them. Crammed with villagers and servants, the circular chamber began to smell. She lost his ease and Adela in the dark, didn't know who touched her, couldn't breathe, and some vile naked thing struck her face and settled on her mouth like a pad. She tried to regain the entrance tunnel, but an influx of villagers swept her back. She hit her head. For an instant she went mad, hitting and gasping like a fanatic. For not only did the crush and stench alarm her, there was also a terrifying echo. Professor Gottbolle had never mentioned an echo. It never impressed him, perhaps. There are some exquisite echoes in India. There is the whisper round the dome at Bijapur. There are the long, solid sentences that voyage through the air at Mandu and return unbroken to their creator. The echo in a Maraba cave is not like these. It is entirely devoid of distinction. Whatever is said, the same monotonous noise replies and quivers up and down the walls until it is absorbed into the roof. Boom is the sound as far as the human alphabet can express it, or boom, or oo boom, utterly dull. Hope, politeness, the blowing of a nose, the squeak of a boot, all produce boom. Even the striking of a match starts a little worm coiling, which is too small to complete a circle, but is eternally watchful. And if several people talk at once, an overlapping howling noise begins. Echoes generate echoes, and the cave is stuffed with a snake composed of small snakes which writhe independently. After Mrs. Moore, all the others poured out. She had given the signal for the reflux. Aziz and Adela both emerged smiling, and she did not want him to think his treat was a failure, so smiled too. As each person emerged, she looked for a villain, but none was there, and she realized that she had been among the mildest individuals, whose only desire was to honor her, and that the naked pad was a poor little baby astride its mother's hip. Nothing evil had been in the cave, but she had not enjoyed herself. No, she had not enjoyed herself, and she decided not to visit a second one. "Did you see the reflection of his match? Rather pretty," asked Adela. "I forget. But he says this isn't a good cave. The best are on the Cowardall. I don't think I shall go on to there. I dislike climbing." "Very well. Let's sit down again in the shade until breakfast's ready." "Ah, but that'll disappoint him so. He has taken such trouble. You should go on. You don't mind." "Perhaps I ought to," said the girl, indifferent to what she did, but desirous of being amiable. The servants were scrambling back to the camp, pursued by grave censures from Mohammed Latif. Aziz came to help the guests over the rocks. He was at the summit of his powers, vigorous and humble, too sure of himself to resent criticism, and he was sincerely pleased when he heard they were altering his plans. "Certainly, Mrs. Quested. So you and I will go together and leave Mrs. Moore here, and we will not be long, yet we will not hurry, because we know that will be her wish." "Quite right. I'm sorry not to come too, but I'm a poor walker." "Dear Mrs. Moore, what does anything matter so long as you are my guest? I am very glad you are not coming, which sounds strange, but you are treating me with true frankness as a friend." "Yes, I am your friend," she said, laying her hand on his sleeve, and thinking, despite her fatigue, how very charming, how very good he was, and how deeply she desired his happiness. "So may I make another suggestion? Don't let so many people come with you this time. I think you may find it more convenient." "Exactly, exactly," he cried, and rushing to the other extreme, forbade all except one guide to accompany Miss Quested and him to the Cowardall. "Is that all right?" he inquired. "Quite right. Now enjoy yourselves, and when you come back, tell me all about it." And she sank into the deck chair. If they reached the big pocket of caves, they would be away nearly an hour. She took out her writing pad and began, "Dear Stella, dear Ralph," then stopped and looked at the queer valley and the feeble invasion of it. Even the elephant had become a nobody. Her eye rose from it to the entrance tunnel. No, she did not wish to repeat that experience. The more she thought over it, the more disagreeable and frightening it became. She minded it much more now than at the time. The crush and the smells she could forget, but the echo began in some indescribable way to undermine her hold on life. Coming at a moment when she chanced to be fatigued, it had managed to murmur, "Pathos, piety, courage, they exist, but are identical, and so is filth. Everything exists, nothing has value." If one had spoken vileness in that place, or quoted lofty poetry, the comment would have been the same. Ooh, boom. If one had spoken with the tongues of angels and pleaded for all the unhappiness and misunderstanding in the world, past, present, and to come, for all the misery men must undergo, whatever their opinion and position, and however much they dodge or bluff, it would amount to the same. The serpent would descend and return to the ceiling. Devils are of the north, and poems can be written about them, but no one could romanticize the Malabar, because it robbed infinity and eternity of their vastness, the only quality that accommodates them to mankind. She tried to go on with her letter, reminding herself that she was only an elderly woman who had got up too early in the morning and journeyed too far, that the despair creeping over her was merely her despair, her personal weakness, and that even if she got a sunstroke and went mad, the rest of the world would go on. But suddenly, at the edge of her mind, religion appeared. Poor little talkative Christianity, and she knew that all its divine words, from "let there be light" to "it is finished," only amounted to boom. Then she was terrified over an area larger than usual. The universe, never comprehensible to her intellect, offered no response to her soul. The mood of the last 2 months took definite form at last, and she realized that she didn't want to write to her children, didn't want to communicate with anyone, not even with God. She sat motionless with horror, and when old Mohammed Latif came up to her, thought he would notice a difference. For a time she thought, "I am going to be ill," to comfort herself. Then she surrendered to the vision. She lost all interest, even in Aziz, and the affectionate and sincere words that she had spoken to him seemed no longer hers, but the air's.
Come andrà a finire? Beh, sicuramente non saremo noi di Caffè Italia, neanche Marco PIovaz, che ringrazio ancora una volta, a darvi il finale del romanzo, ma ci andremo abbastanza vicini. Per scoprire quanto vicini andremo alla fine, al termine di questa storia, dovrete seguirci anche nella prossima puntata, che sarà davvero l'ultima, dedicata a Passaggio to India, Passaggio in India, di E.M Forster. Lingue originali venerdì, sabato e domenica, sempre alle ore 22, lingua inglese il venerdì, lingua e letteratura tedesca il sabato con Nadia Meroni, e la domenica tocca a Barbara Marchand per portarci, letterariamente parlando, in Francia. Da Dario Albertini, grazie per l'ascolto. Appuntamento alla prossima settimana.
Lingue originali.